Okay, today we're going to talk about when we play chords, how do we know what fingers to use? It's one of the top questions I get from students. I'll ask them to play, let's say, a D flat major, and they'll do all kind of funky things with their hands and like, they don't exactly know what fingers to use. So here, let's talk about that. So, in general, if we use our pinky and thumb, those can have the most reach. So if it's a really wide chord, pinky and thumb are good to use for the outer notes, or even a close chord. So these are, so for any white key, white chord, that's definitely an acceptable 1, 3, and 5 fingers. You could also try 1, 2, 3 if your hand's big enough to reach that. 1, 2, and 4. For white ones, almost anything will work. I probably wouldn't do that one though, unless you knew you were going to something like outside of that next. But don't do that just because it feels like it works the best, because usually that won't work the best. Okay, and let's talk about if we include black keys. So even the same fingerings I just talked about will usually work for any white, black, white as well. 1, 3, and 5, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 4, 1, 2, 5, depending what you're going to and what you're coming from. But I would recommend to do the thumb on a black key for a lot of the ones that begin on a black key. So 1, 2, and 3 would be acceptable for that. Once again, 1, 2, and 4. 1, 3, 4 feels a little awkward, so I wouldn't recommend that as the first choice. 1, 3, and 5 is another good choice. So that'll work for anything that's white, black, white. Or 1, 2, 3, white, black, white. 1, 3, and 5. 1, 2, and 3, 1, 3, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, and 5. If it's all black, we almost have as many options as if it's all white. 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 5. I probably wouldn't do that though, 2, 3, and 4. Like I said, unless you know that you're going to something like that. If you wanted to save the outer fingers for doing notes that are above and below the existing ones, that's the only reason I could think to do that. All right, now let's look at 4-note chords. So let's see, it was an A7. One of my favorite fingerings to use for something like that is 1, 2, 3, 5. The reason is because if you use like these two, 4 and 5 are the weaker fingers, so it might feel a little more awkward. And not everyone can reach these two being spread out, but if you can, then you can absolutely do that too. But that's a pretty good one for a 4-note chord. If we're doing, say, B flat 7, where we have these two as black keys, 1, 2, and 3, 4. 3 and 4 is a good one. 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 4, 5. So in general, most of the time you want the thumb to play the bottom note. If we're talking about the left hand, of course, it's the reverse. But the pinky and thumb being the outer notes is a good rule for each hand, or a suggestion, because it all depends what we're going to and coming from. So let's talk about a little more about going to and coming from something. So let's say this is a D major, right? This is an inversion of D major. D major is normally that, but I put the A down here. So let's say I knew I was going to G after this. G is this. So it makes sense to keep the same finger on this middle note, on the D. So I can use either 1, 2, and 4, and then just move the thumb. This one's already in place. The pinky's already on G for the next G chord. This one's already in place, which is why it makes sense to keep this like that. 1, 2, and 5. So it makes it so that my only real movement is that thumb going from there to there, which is very common. Let's say I'm going down. I'm going from this to A major. So I no longer would want to use these fingers. I would probably want the pinky and thumb for that, and then save these two to play the rest of the A chord. So obviously that one works better because there's really no movement at all. Everything's already in place with that first hand position. Let's do one more example. Let's say I'm going from this. Let's say I'm going to E flat minor. So E flat would be here. B flat is already in the middle. G flat would be, right? So 1, 2, and 4. And the only movement I'm doing is the thumb going there to there, because everything else is already in place. So if you're only concerned with playing a single chord, then we went through all the options. 1, 2, 3 usually works. 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 5. Probably not that. If you're going to and coming from something, just think about chord A and chord B, or the first and the second chords, and say what makes the most sense. You want to keep as many of them in the same place as possible, and you want to have as many of them ready to get to the next one as possible. So hopefully that helps you guys out. So now you can Have the best possible fingerings for any of the chord movements you're doing.